My name is Salim Javed and I'm an assistant professor at the Faculty of Mass Communication and Media Technology at SGT University. Let's start understanding cinema. Well, it may sound odd to some. They will say, what is there in cinema to understand? It's for enjoyment. Well, you are absolutely right that cinema is for enjoyment. Now think it for a moment and go back in your memory and find out a subject which you used to enjoy, because you used to understand that subject, therefore you used to enjoy it more. Now think it in terms of films, that if you understand, you enjoy it more. You are no more a passive viewer sitting in front of a screen and not participating at all. So when you understand cinema, your viewing becomes active, mature. You understand more, therefore you enjoy it more. Now, I'll be starting this lecture with the history of cinema. Well, some of you will say that history of anything is boring. Well, not here. I'll be presenting the history of cinema in a very interesting or story-like manner. So, the history of cinema started with a bet. Now, what kind of a bet that the history of cinema started with? Well, there was a bet, and there was a gentleman called Leland Stanford. He was the governor of California. Now, this gentleman, Leland Stanford, was in a this race course, and there was a bet that at certain point of time, when the horse is running, at one particular moment, all the four legs of a horse is there in the air. Now, imagine when this bet was placed somewhere 1872. Because at 1872, Edward Muybridge, a famous photographer, was called in. So imagine a time when people just do not know that when a horse is running, all the four legs of that particular horse will be in air or not. So it was a matter of great concern, and there was a bet, a huge sum was there on the bet. Now, when this Leland Stanford, the gentleman who was the governor of California, he called in a very famous photographer of that time called Edward Muybridge in 1872. Now, Edward Muybridge made a name for himself in landscape photography, and Leland Stanford happened to know that. So he invited him and explained the entire situation, that something like this is happening, and I want you to prove that when the horse is running, all the four hooves of the horse is there in the air. So he took 5 years, and in the summer of 1877, he arranged 12 cameras, electrically operated cameras, along with the Sacramento racetrack. Now, the Sacramento is a place, so there was a racing track. He put a white paper behind, put a camera, 12 electrically operated cameras in the row, and as the horse started running, that horse started stretching wire across it, which was basically tripping the camera shutter. Though he set up 12 cameras, but 11 worked, and out of those 11 photographs, one particular picture had all the four legs of a horse in the air. Now, Edward Muybridge subsequently discovered that this one picture where all the four legs of the horse are there in the air, so this when the horse was galloping, and so he put this on a machine called Kinetoscope. And later on, it was this Kinetoscope on which he developed his zoopraxiscope. So he basically, in Kinetoscope, he used a mounting glass plate photograph of a galloping horse and enlarged it through Kinetoscope. And when it came later on, almost after a year, in 1879, he developed a zoopraxiscope. Now, this zoopraxiscope is a wonderful device, a device which had counter-rotating disc that projected the image not only successfully but sequentially with the help of a magic lantern on a screen. Now imagine that you really have to understand the importance of this incident. You really have to understand that till this time and next 1 or 2 or 3, 4 decades, the importance of photography, it was so important that nobody was thinking of moving images. So these are images. So 12 cameras, 11 worked. So you have 11 different pictures which are projected through Kinetoscope and later on with zoopraxiscope. And when you started playing it one after another, so there was a sort of a elementary illusion that the horse is running, because they were playing suppose 11 pictures per second, so that there was a kind of an illusion. But this even nascent illusion actually proved the fact that when horse is running, all the 4 legs of the horse are there in the air. Now please understand that when we are talking about camera, be that still camera or be that moving camera, because from still camera we will be gradually moving to moving pictures. Now when you talk about photography, that photography is a certain moment of a particular time. But when you play it on a motion picture camera, so you have those still images intact, there is no problem with that, but those number of pictures are run at a certain speed. So that is how this zoopraxiscope becomes a very interesting instrument in the development of motion camera. Now, so this was about Edward Muybridge, his contribution about Kinetoscope and zoopraxiscope, but he was not the man who developed the motion picture camera. Now in year 1882 there was another gentleman. He was a French physicist and an expert in animal locomotion. His name is Jules Murray. Now this guy Jules Murray, he basically made a very interesting camera, and the name of that camera is chrono photographic gun. Now he basically took through one camera. Now please understand, there is a development. Earlier when we talk about Edward Muybridge, we are talking about 12 cameras, 11 cameras work, so one picture, and that one of the pictures had the image of all the 4 legs of a horse in air. Now from Edward Muybridge to Jules Murray, there is a huge development. Now if Edward Muybridge used 12 cameras, Jules Murray used 1, and the name of that camera is chrono photographic gun. It is called a chrono photographic gun because it looks like a rifle. You literally aim for the picture through this camera. It's very handy. So there was a glass plate in it, and this gentleman, Jules Murray, he was a specialist in animal locomotion, and he recorded a bird's flight. He took 12 simultaneous photographs through a single camera. So that 1 second had 12 different photographs of a bird flight, and it was mounted on a glass plate. Now this is a huge development from Edward Muybridge to Jules Murray. Now please understand that as we'll be moving further during this lecture, you will understand that how from one development to another development, what kind of change is brought in. So not only you replaced lot of cameras with one single camera, you are recording 12 simultaneous photographs of a bird flight through this chrono photographic gun, which was a huge development. Now if you look at this 1882 thing, Jules Murray, almost after a year, which makes it 1883, Jules Murray basically switched from that cumbersome glass plate to paper roll film. Now this is another major development which in a way had the effect of introducing film strip to cinematography. When you talk about a glass plate, what you are doing along with those glass plates, a lot of other equipments, lot of other hassles, they creep in. But when you bring in paper roll film, it becomes more convenient. It is more doable for further activities. Now So far we have talked about Edward Muybridge, then we talked about Edwin Jules Murray. Now third in the row is Hannibal Goodwin. Now he also comes with a surprise. He was an Episcopalian minister and was the first to use celluloid roll film. So just now you have the introduction of paper roll film, and now through Hannibal Goodwin we have the introduction of celluloid roll film, which has a base of light sensitive material or emulsion in year 1887. Now what happens when this celluloid roll film comes in frame? Celluloid roll film was more durable as compared to paper roll film. It did not have cumbersome glass plate, and it was only, we were using one camera at this point of time. So what Hannibal Goodwin did, he immediately sold this idea to American entrepreneur called George Eastman. Now George Eastman is being credited to popularize photography through his mass production of cameras and these celluloid roll films. Now George Eastman started making these celluloid roll films on an industrial scale by year 1888. Now so far we have talked about three people. First we talked about Edward Muybridge. So Edward Muybridge, the bet, the experiment, 12 cameras, horse running. One of the picture has all the four hooves of a horse in the air. Then we talked about Edwin Jules Murray, chrono photographic gun, 12 simultaneous photograph of a bird's flight. Then he used the paper roll film, and then we are talking now we have just talked about Hannibal Goodwin and how he used celluloid roll film, and how he sold his idea to George Eastman, and how by year 1888 George Eastman started the industrial production of celluloid roll film. Now so for all these three people, they be that Edwin Jules Murray, Hannibal Goodwin, or Edward Muybridge, none of them was interested in moving pictures. It was like everybody was very comfortable with the still photography by that time. So the so the chance of discovering something which is moving pictures was out of question. So all these three gentlemen, great people with great innovation and achievements, none of them was interested in moving pictures. So how it all started? Well, after this paper roll film and this celluloid roll film, within few years, plastic recording medium was introduced along with the technical breakthrough of Edward Muybridge, Edwin Jules Murray, and all the experiments. So from paper roll film we come to plastic recording medium. Now all these developments that I have just talked about actually enabled Edison Laboratories in Menlo Park in New Jersey in 1889 to invent kinetograph. Now this is the first motion picture camera. Now when we talk about this kinetograph, we are talking about Thomas Alva Edison. Now Thomas Alva Edison is we call him Edison. He is popularly known as Thomas Edison. Thomas Alva Edison is his full name. Now like his predecessors, even Thomas Alva Edison was not interested in developing this motion picture camera. He was very happy with the kind of business of he had a successful business of phonograph, so he was very happy with that business, and he was not interested in developing this motion picture camera. I'll explain why that was so. Now so he had a very successful business of phonograph, but Thomas Alva Edison was looking for some instrument basically, or some machine which could bring a visual assistance or accompaniment to his phonograph. Now, this particular thing that I've just said, that he was looking for an instrument or a device for visual accompaniment of his phonograph, becomes catalyst in the in bringing up the motion picture camera. Now, he hired a young man, a young laboratory assistant called William Kennedy Laurie Dixon. Now, this is a long name, William Kennedy Laurie Dixon, so you can remember it by the name of Dixon only. Now, this gentleman called William Kennedy Laurie Dixon was hired by Thomas Alva Edison, and he was roped in to develop a machine which can visually accompany phonograph, which Thomas Alva Edison was making. Now, Thomas Alva Edison vision, he studied all the mechanism, all the mechanics, all the documents of Edward Muybridge, because it was a documented thing. So he started reading Edward Muybridge, all the developments. Then he started reading Jules Murray, his chronophotographic gun, and Hannibal Goodwin, so celluloid roll film. And by studying all these three people, and obviously Thomas Alva Edison was there, he, in a brilliant synthesis, developed something called kinetograph. Now, this William Kennedy Laurie Dixon actually began experimenting with celluloid roll film in a battery-driven camera similar to chronophotographic gun at Jules Murray, and what he invented was called kinetograph. Now, we have to understand few things here. That first of all, William Kennedy Laurie Dixon was employed by Thomas Alva Edison. He was a young laboratory assistant. Thomas Alva Edison had some plans. He had 2 patents by this time, which are called caveats. We'll talk about it later during this lecture. So he had 2 caveats by this time. And when they were experimenting, he filed for 2 more caveats. Now, these caveats is something you understand it like patent. So, Thomas Alva Edison basically filed 4 caveats by 1891. So, this is a separate information which we will pick up later on. When William Kennedy Laurie Dixon started experimenting towards making this motion picture camera, he studied his predecessors, everything, like he made a camera which was battery driven, and it was all fantastic. It started recording and everything. Now, the motion picture camera kinetograph which was developed, it was with fast intermittent at a speed of up to 46 frame per second. Now, what does it mean, and why it has to do with something called 19 mm film or 35 mm film? Now, to understand this development, what happens when you start understanding history of something? What happens is that we do not understand the context in which that event is taking place. But there is where I fit in, that I'm trying to tell you all these major developments in a form of a story so that you can understand it better. Now, imagine that you have developed a camera, and in that camera you do not have a film. Now, you have camera but you do not have a film, then how would you record? Now, so far we have talked about paper roll film, which is Jules Murray, and then we talked about Hannibal Goodwin, where we were talking about celluloid roll film. But it was celluloid roll film, and then I talked about the plastic medium that was introduced. But there was nothing called 8 mm, 16 mm, 35 mm, 70 mm by that time. So this very impractical thing, so it became very impractical. So what this William Kennedy Laurie Dixon did, he actually collaborated with the Eastman Company, and he developed special films, perforated films, like this 19 mm film which he used for the working prototype, and 35 mm film which he actually used for final unveiling in year 1893. Now, you have these two experiments. Now you have camera, kinetograph. Now you have film also, which is he started with 19 mm and then he jumped on to, he finally decided to do it with 35 mm. But where is the place? Obviously you need to have a camera, then you need to have a film, but you need to have a place also. And by this time there were no electric lights, these electric lamps were available, so it was only the sunlight with which you could record. But the only problem with the kinetograph was that it was a heavy machine. It was somewhere around 500 pound. Now you cannot move a machine which is of 500 pound. So rather than you take the camera to the event, you have to bring in the event in front of the camera. So that was the technological limitation of the camera, that it was so heavy that it was not possible to move. Now when you talk about this, now the kinetoscope was actually a peep show machine for one person at a time. And when you talk about kinetoscope, now when you're talking about a kinetoscope, if you look at the picture of kinetoscope, you will understand that it was a kind of a peep show machine. Like you looking like this in the camera, so there was a perforated film which keeps on running at a certain speed, and this is how people were watching a kind of a illusion of a movement. So those films were running at a certain speed and they started creating an illusion. Interestingly, the very interesting point here is that Thomas Alva Edison actually took the intellectual credit of inventing the kinetoscope. William Kennedy Laurie Dixon was left empty-handed. The man who invented camera was left empty-handed, and there was no claim that it was William Kennedy Laurie Dixon who made the first motion picture camera. There was an interesting paper called Edison Motion Picture Myth, which was written by Gordon Hendricks, and he published this paper from the University of California in 1961. And in that particular paper, Gordon Hendricks established that the rightful inventor of kinetograph was none other than William Kennedy Laurie Dixon. And after this paper, nobody actually doubted the fact that the inventor of this kinetograph is none other than William Kennedy Laurie Dixon. But like his predecessors, Thomas Alva Edison was also of the belief that the future of technology is not in its projection. Now, so far we have talked about 3 to 4 interesting people, which is Edward Muybridge, Jules Murray, Hannibal Goodwin, and then Thomas Alva Edison and William Kennedy Laurie Dixon. I hope that you must have enjoyed this explanation. We will be continuing this explanation in our coming video. Thank you very much.